Hola, hello everyone. How are you doing? We're going to be joined by Claire Evans in a couple of minutes from School of Humanity, and we're going to be talking about their innovative curriculums and how they are innovating in high school at a global level. So let's see when Claire can join us. I'm really looking forward to know more about this program on school. They're doing something pretty different in the way that we see high school. As a way to support youth to become change makers and to really live through their passions to have a positive impact. So let's see. Yeah, here is Claire. Let me give her access. Live, yes. That's it. We're gonna be with her just in a minute. Yeah, ready. Hello, Claire.
Hi, David. How's it going?
Good, nice to see you.
Good, good.
Yeah, I feel like we're seeing each other very often lately. It's nice, it's nice. I think all these different conversations that we're having, reflecting about the future of education and all these different trends as well, AI and climate change and how it's impacting our views. But anyways, let me make a quick introduction about this webinar series and about what we do here. So I'm David from Evolving Education. And what we do is to research and democratize how some of the most innovative learning spaces around the planet are transforming education to empower children and youth to take control of their learning, their lives, and co-create a world with values. And one of the ways in which we do that, and that we are so lucky, is to share these conversations with amazing people that are already transforming education. Because I think that something that we all need to be aware is that there are already other possibilities for supporting youth to develop. They already exist, like a School of Humanity. And we all need to know about these possibilities to get inspired, to bring more children into these spaces, and to co-create and learn from each other. So thank you, Claire, for joining us. Claire is a Chief Learning Officer at the School of Humanity, which is a global high school or secondary education to support youth to find their passions, and very connected as well, I think, with social action and the challenges of our present and our future, and how can we support youth to be ready for these challenges that we're starting to experiment already. So maybe I'll stop there and I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit, Claire.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I mean, I think you've covered the introduction, but just to give a bit of background on me. So yeah, I'm the Chief Learning Officer at School of Humanity. I've been there for just over a year, and we are, as you say, a breakthrough online high school reinventing education. So the high school actually launched in September of 2022. So we're into our third term now of the first year with our first founding cohort. And previously we were running a supplementary educational program, which we continue to run, but that was prior to actually launching the high school. So just to give, I don't know if you want a bit of background on me, if I dive straight into the school.
That would be great, I think, because you also have quite a long trajectory in education through different lenses.
Yeah, so originally I trained as a high school science teacher, actually specializing in methodology of CLIL, which is content and language integrated learning. So that's specifically looking at how to kind of do a 2-for-1. So you're teaching a language, but at the same time you're actually teaching a subject, a discipline. So you actually do you deliver the discipline through a second language, and the learners in that way are kind of absorbing both the language and the content. So that was kind of where I started, and I went to teach in a school in Belgium, teaching science to bilingual learners. So they were kind of francophone learners, but learning in English. And then we had the opportunity to come over to Chile. My husband had a job here, so we moved over to Chile, which is where I'm living now. And I kind of made the conscious decision to not go back into high schools, for the most importantly because I couldn't speak Spanish at the time when I arrived, so that was like a big deciding factor. But also having a young family as well, I just felt that it wasn't compatible with having a young family at the time. And so rather than doing that, I actually went into kind of more educational projects, working in projects, also running an English language centre at the university here in Valdivia in the south of Chile where I live. But then I got into the field of working with gifted and talented learners, and kind of working on like a pull-out program to really help those learners kind of develop beyond what they were kind of accessing in their regular school or their regular schooling, helping them kind of push the boundaries a little bit of what they had access to. And then I worked on a really interesting project with Dr. Joseph Renzulli, who is the author of many different educational psychology areas. In particular, he's worked in the areas of giftedness, and his 3-ring concept of giftedness, and then something called the school-wide enrichment model, which was particularly what I worked on in a project called Talento en tu Escuela, specifically looking at how young people could develop their talents. The kind of the premise being that if they are not exposed to certain things, then they will never know. So for example, you might have a learner who is a really talented photographer, but if you never give them a camera, they'll never know that they were really good at taking photos, you know. So it's kind of trying to provide the opportunities for young people to discover what their talents are within a traditional schooling framework. And that was really super interesting, and that led me on to invention education, which I then launched my own program in Chile called Yo Invento, which was an education program, a supplementary educational program for learners to help them develop what we call the 4 C's of STEM, so creativity, creative thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration. So that was kind of our focus. And then through that, then we had the pandemic and everything. So going from being an in-person program in schools in the region of Los Rios in Chile, we then went online, of course, as many people did, as everybody did really, in educational programs. And then by doing it online, initially we were focused on the same region in Los Rios, and then we just kind of realized that, you know, there's no limit now. We're not limited to a geographical location, and so the only limit really was time zone and language. But through that, we actually reached out to other Latin American countries, and we ended up running the program online with 7 different countries, which was excellent, and that kind of triggered an interest that I have also in cultural competence and giving learners the opportunity to interact with other learners from other countries, and you know, working together and collaborating, which of course by using the internet that becomes totally accessible and feasible. And that then led on to School of Humanities, so that's where I am now at the School of Humanities. So yeah.
Wow, what a journey. And I love those 4 C's, and you just added a 5th one, the cultural competence, which is most relevant today, I think, than ever. Both to be able to communicate with other people, but also to value those differences and the richness that they bring to any conversation and our own heritage. And I'm sure that those enrichment projects and how to develop talents play a key part on what you're doing now as well in the School of Humanities. So maybe you can tell us, for people that know nothing about the School of Humanity, what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So School of Humanity is a breakthrough online high school reinventing education. So instead of exams, the learners learn through real-world projects, and instead of a standardized curriculum, they learn through personalized learning journeys. And instead of memorization, they focus really on developing skills, developing networks, and developing a portfolio. So it's School of Humanity is a licensed American online high school, but in our founding cohort we have learners who are enrolled from 10 different countries, and in fact in terms of nationality it's even more than that, as we have various learners who are of a nationality but living or residing in a different country. So it's really very rich, very culturally rich. It is what we call challenge-based. So the learners throughout the course of a term, they will tackle a challenge, and they'll go through various phases. So each term follows a structure, and they will begin by engaging with the challenge, where they're working with a learning facilitator, really kind of exploring it from a multidisciplinary lens. And what I mean by that is that they, you know, instead of looking at science, then they'll look at a broad theme, but they'll have elements of science integrated into what they are looking at. So just to give an example, at the moment, one of the challenges is designing space habitats. And so, of course, there's a lot of elements of science there. They've been looking at alloys, for example. What sort of materials would they need to build a spacecraft out of, or to build a, you know, a structure on Mars, for example? What kind of materials would they need to use? Also looking at elements of architecture. So what would the design look like? How would that be? And that incorporates maths as well, where they've been looking at, you know, Pythagoras' theorem to work out the angles they need to design their structure. So they're looking at these different disciplines, but within a broader theme. And that kind of makes it kind of have this kind of sense of real world application, as opposed to just a theoretical subject that they're having to learn. So that they spend the first part of the term exploring the challenge, looking at these different ideas connected with this broad challenge that they're looking at. And then they'll go into something called the investigate phase, and actually just going into that phase now in this term. So the investigate phase is where they'll start to just break it down into sub-challenges and sub-areas. So having explored the theme over a course of about 5 weeks, they'll then start to identify which areas they were particularly interested in, related to their designing space habitats, for example, or the other one that we're running at the moment is maintaining global peace. So the learners will then kind of break that down and decide what they are particularly interested in. And by the end of the investigate phase, they come up with a problem statement. So that's something specifically that they want to work on. And then they'll go into something called the act phase. So that's where they're applying everything that they've learned and looking at their problem statements and working out what they need to do to solve it, essentially. What kind of prototype do they need to come up with to solve that specific problem that they've identified. And then that brings them more or less to the end of that part of the challenge. And then we always finish up with them presenting to each other. So they'll present their solutions. We then actually go on to a micro internship phase. Really important for them to apply it again to a real world situation. And in the micro internships, we ask organizations from around the world to partner with us. It's micro, as is very short, as the name suggests. It's just over the course of 2 weeks. But the learners will, the organizations will set the learners a challenge, and the idea is that it's something that they genuinely are facing. So something they really would appreciate having young people's perspective on how to solve. And then the learners will work as a team, and they'll collaborate, and then they'll come up with some kind of solution and present that back to the organization. And then that brings us to the end of the term. And we always finish the term with a showcase, so a global showcase where the learners can present their work, just a celebration of the work that they've done over the course of the term.
Fantastic. I really like that structure. I think of the challenge-based learning, that it gives like some tips of an structure for anyone that wants to give it a try. Can you help me? So I got the investigate, the problem statement, and the prototype. What else is in there?
It's actually the phases that we follow. The challenge-based learning follows these 3 phases. So it starts with engage. That's where they're exploring the challenge. Then they go into the investigate, where they come up with sub-challenges and a problem statement. And then the act, where they're applying it. And then we've actually added a 4th phase, which I didn't mention, but we do a reflect phase as well. So the last week of term is always looking back on the journey and looking on their learning journey. What have they learned? What have there been the milestones? What are the key takeaways? And kind of celebrating that journey with the learners, and then the sharing through the global showcase.
Yeah, it's so important, that reflection I missed. Now, when I look back at my own high school, it's like I did the exam and then I ran away from high school as fast as I could. But that reflection point of what have you learned about yourself, what have you learned about your passions, what have you learned about collaborating with other people, that's so meaningful. And it changes everything from something that you were jumping from one step to another, because at some point it feels like there's something engaging that is coming next, and you just do it to finally kind of integrating all those insights and knowledge. And considering how diverse these challenges are, there's definitely a good need to stop, I think, and to look at, wow, what's everything that happened here? Look at everything I learned about literature and about math and about how to express myself. That otherwise, I think we also need to feel that sense of accomplishment, and knowing that we're surrounded by some other schools that not necessarily work this way, to understand that I'm actually meeting all those goals as well, just way more fun in a way. Yeah. And how did you come up with these challenges, like like global peace or living on a space settlement? That's like big things that don't tend to come up in any high school curriculum.
I mean, what's really important at the School of Humanities is that we are preparing learners for the future. We're giving them a set of skills that they can then use, transferable, future-ready skills. And we want to make the learning engaging. We want to make it fun and relative as well to the times we're living in, and future-focused. So designing space habitat, something that comes up a lot, and it's it's something very relevant. Maintaining global peace, I think, is relevant to everyone, and is always something that people and learners in particular can engage with. That we have a team. The way that we work is we have a team of learning designers, and their role is specifically to design the content. Rather than in a traditional school where you might have a teacher who is following a scheme of work, they might be designing their own sessions, but within that scheme of work, for example. The way that we've designed it at School of Humanities is that there's this team of learning designers who specifically can design the content, and then the learning facilitators who impart the content. So the learning facilitators will work with the learners using the content that's been provided to them by the team of learning designers. And this just ensures that the role of the facilitator is 100% focused on developing the relationship with the learners, and that the team of learning designers, kind of their role really is focusing on that content. And it's really interesting to be working that way. It's quite different from anything that I had experienced previously in a kind of more traditional context. But it does help, I think, for them to have this defined role. And it also means that it's replicable. So the same challenge can be run again and again, and the content is all set out already, and different cohorts of learners will be getting the same content year on year.
No, that's wonderful, and that's kind of how I imagine the role of the teachers evolving towards facilitators of learning. Just thinking like with a more traditional curriculum, Khan Academy, for instance, they have all the line contents that they want in an easily accessible manner. And in the world of information, we don't really need anyone just for transferring information, but we need a lot of people with amazing facilitation of how to learn and how to support people to find the best way for each of us to learn. And I think that's how teaching is going to evolve. So I think taking that workload out of the shoulders of the teachers to have to provide all the contents and all the curriculum, I think is fantastic, because you can focus on the relationship. I shared that report through our group of the Learning Expedition from Catalyst 2030, which is an organization trying to meet the SDGs. And at the beginning of it, there was a letter from students, from youth from around the world, and they were asking for 3 core changes. And the number one was the relationship between the teacher and the student. They said that without that relationship being fixed and more horizontal, there wasn't anything else that they could accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, that's fundamental. Yeah, it is. It is fundamental. I think something important as well is that the facilitators don't need to be content specialists either. I mean, obviously, it helps that they've got content, and generally, they do, but they don't need to know everything. They don't need to simply regurgitate the information to the learners. So it's very much, you know, a learning journey, and facilitators are accompanying the learners on their journey of exploration, and helping them and supporting them, and where, you know, if there's something that they don't know about, then they'll help the learners to find or suggest where they could look for information, for example. So I think that's important as well, that, you know, this idea that learners don't need to know, sorry, not learners, the teacher doesn't need to know it all. It doesn't need to be a specialist, you know, somebody, an expert, for example. They need to be an expert in facilitating, but not necessarily in the content.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think lots of more training and development and support is coming to educators to be able to develop these key core skills. All right, and something that I'm curious about, because you have within these big challenges, but then there are individualized learning journeys, and this is a big challenge for any school, to how to provide personalized learning while you have a big group of people that you need to manage somehow. And so, how do you do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So already we have the idea that the learners are choosing their own challenge that they're going to work on, their own personal project. So that, from that point of view, they're
okay, I think that we're back online. Yes, I need to, Claire can connect with me, but internet issues. Pretty windy where I am, and these things happen once in a while. Here is Claire. Let me invite you. It says now. Sorry.
We're back.
Yeah, internet connection issues. But our daily life with remote work.
I didn't know if it was me.
Yeah, I was there like, am I still busy or no? But well, we're back. So you were talking about personalized learning journey. So just for anyone that is joining us now, we're talking with Claire from the School of Humanity, and we're talking about that they do challenge-based learning, where they pick up a big challenge like Nobel Peace, and then encourage learners to investigate about them through really integrating lots of different pieces of knowledge. And one key element is that they follow their personalized learning plan. And more about how it's possible to do that when you have lots of people looking at the same
Just cut out again, David. Okay. Are you okay? Can you hear me? All right. Good. So yeah, so the learners will choose the challenge that they want to work on. At the start of the term, they're given a choice between the two. So we're running concurrently. We've got the maintaining global peace and designing space habitat at the moment. And then within that challenge, they will then choose their personal project that they want to work on. So that's already one step that's personalized. They also, we provide something called skill units. So these are things that they're asynchronous modules that they can work on, which helps them develop certain key skills. So for example, we have a whole range, a whole catalog, in fact, and the learners will work on one skill unit, and then once they finish one, they'll move on to the next one. And we have things like fundamentals of blockchain, or like just to mention, we have some that are like related to hard skills, like the blockchain one, for example, or learning how to code or things like that. And then we have others that are more soft skills, so things like learning how to learn, certain flourishing skills, which I'll talk more about that as well, the whole flourishing curriculum. So they work on the skills, and they can choose which skills they want to work on, and they are encouraged to develop the skills that they need to specifically work on the personal project that they're working on. But it is very much depending on their interests and what they need to work on. They have something also called a personalized curriculum plan. So this is, again, it's a tool that we provide for them, where they are reflecting on their learning journey. They're highlighting things that they've developed, so creative projects that they've worked on, or just kind of documenting everything that they've been working on. And then something that's really important to talk about as well is that for all of the assignments and everything, the skills, the challenges that they're working on, all of that is goes through a credit tracking system. So everything they do, they gain credit for, and those credits will be related to what we call human literacies framework. So the human literacies framework is essentially our curriculum, and that again has been designed by the team of learning designers and learning architects, and informed by cutting edge research from the OECD and the World Education Forum, for example, very much based on the skills that learners will need in the future of work, and tools to help them flourish. And we have the human literacies are basically, we have 6 literacies that we've identified, which are flourishing, discovery, thought, creativity, action, and society. And so every assignment and everything that every skill unit is mapped to the human literacies framework, and learners will accumulate credits every time they complete an assignment. And so over the course of their high school career, they need to be working on different skills and accumulating credits in all of those areas. So it might be that we have a learner who's very keen on writing and, you know, very, very good communication skills, but they really do need to work on their science skills as well, or their, you know, discovery as well. And so they will be encouraged, or will recommend them in personalized conversations with their facilitator or with their pathway advisor to help guide them and kind of orientate them on the sort of skill units that perhaps they should think about taking, so that they are covering all of the credit areas. But essentially, ultimately, it's up to them to decide how they want to do it, when they want to do it, when they want to work as well. So just to kind of emphasize that, we have the synchronous learning sessions, which is the workshops throughout the week that I mentioned briefly, pathway advisory. We have a skills lab. They have a mentorship session, so they work with a mentor as well, who will help develop the content into the specific challenge they're working on. And then flourishing sessions, which I will talk more about that specifically, because that's important as well, that I want to really highlight that. Yeah, they will just be encouraged to, they work on their synchronous sessions. That's what I was saying. They work on their synchronous sessions. Those are the live sessions where they're interacting with their peers, with their educators, their facilitators or mentors. And then they have asynchronous learning. So that is completely up to them when they want to plan that and when they want to do it. So it does add this layer of ownership over their, or responsibility over when they do their learning, when they, you know, organize themselves. They really have to develop their organizational skills, and that's something we work on a lot, is helping them to, you know, how to set up Google Calendar, for example, how to set up reminders, things like that, so they know when they need to kind of sit down and get to work. And yeah, yeah, I think that's the main points there.
Oh no, that's a lot of things in there, really, to make it personalized, and also to keep track of what's going on out of the multiple areas of development that you can go through. What are you actually achieving? What can be recorded? And that actually takes me to the next question, which was about when you have so many personalized paths, how to measure progression, how to give meaningful feedback. Although I guess that one-to-one facilitation has a lot to do with that. But maybe it has more to do, rather than with progress or anything that is not just measuring for the sake of measuring. When youth leaves a school of humanity and they imagine they want to go to university or something like this, how can they meet those accreditation that allows them to keep on going forward? No, and I guess those credits that you were mentioning are related to these somehow.
Yes, they are, of course. Yeah, and that leads. Yeah, that's a great question, and that leads us into the mastery transcript. So the mastery transcript is a breakthrough approach to documenting and communicating learning, and it provides a very holistic and personalized picture of a learner's achievements, specifically by means of a portfolio, So all of the assignments, all of the work that learners will do, all of the work will go into the system, and it's evaluated by the facilitators. Feedback is given to the learners to help them progress, assessment for learning to help them move forward. And then the learners will actually decide which pieces of work or which assignments or which projects they're most proud of, and that will then get showcased in their portfolio. So when they graduate from high school, they will have something called this mastery transcript, which it's a way of showing what they can do, showing what skills they've achieved, showing what they are capable of, without having a grade specifically that is assigned to them. So, rather than saying, well, their grade's A in English, for example, it will actually show projects or essays and things like that they've written, which will kind of essentially prove what they can do. So that's what we work towards. The credit areas that I mentioned before, everything is mapped to a credit tracking system. So every time they do an assignment, that they will be gaining credit in the human literacies, that, as I mentioned before. So if they've done something that shows creativity, then they will be getting credits for their creativity, for example. And then at the end of each year, all of their credits will be mapped over to the mastery transcript, and they'll get a transcript for the end of each year showing what they've worked on that year, and having a portfolio which will evidence that as well. So, you don't just say, I've got creativity skills. You actually can show what you've done to prove that you've got those creativity skills. Oh, and just in terms of, I just wanted to add one more thing about that. The mastery transcript, it is relatively new, but it is growing. A number of schools around the world are adopting this approach, particularly future-facing or future-thinking schools, progressive schools. And universities are starting to recognise it as well. So there is a list of about 300 universities, particularly US-based, but in other countries as well, who are recognising the mastery transcript, and are open to that. And within that list, there are some very high-ranking universities. I think MIT and Harvard, for example, are up there on that list. So it is more and more becoming a recognised way of evaluating a learner and assessing what they can do. Just to also highlight something that we do as well is to all of our credits areas are mapped out to the advanced to the AP in the US. So all of the content that we cover essentially is mapped out to the AP curriculum. So we can do like not convergence. What's the word I'm looking for?
Like a match.
Yeah, exactly. It can be matched up, and so the learners, although we don't do that exam, and we also, it's not something that School of Humanity does, but if a learner wants to then go on and do that exam to be able to get into a university, for example, if it is a university that doesn't recognise the master transcript, then they will have covered all of the content that they need to be able to do the exam throughout their learning journey at School of Humanity.
Awesome. Now, this is an amazing adaptation, because we need, while the different stages of education get used to the concept that grades do not represent a person, we need these intermediary forms to allow people to grow holistically, finding their passions in all dimensions, and at the same time allowing them to jump into whichever train they choose to, going to college or whatever it is, knowing that precisely that better education that they receive is not a restriction for them to continue their educational path in any direction. That's fantastic, and great to know about the mastery transcript. I actually didn't know about this one. I knew about another one that came out of Australia, that it has a, I don't remember right now the name, but it's also like life skills curriculum, and it's, as you said, it's like a representation of the person more holistically with the skills and portfolios, and it's also recognized by several universities in Australia and the US and New Zealand. So great to know that more of these tools are emerging, because I think one of the key limitations for many educators that want to do things differently is that at the end of the day they're asked to do an exam, to have a mark, a numeric outcome of whatever happened in the classroom, and that's really such a poor representation of a person's development. But anyway, so you mentioned something that caught my attention, and I wanted to talk more about it, and that's the flourishing curriculum. And that just the name already is like, yes, we have to know more about it.
Yeah, and it's something I definitely wanted to discuss as well. So I've been talking about the challenges that we have the learners working on, and then the synchronous classes that they have during, or the synchronous sessions that they have during the week. One of the regular weekly sessions is called Human Flourishing, and also that's also one of the 6 literacies that we have in our human literacies framework. So Human Flourishing is really looking at the whole individual and how we can help learners really understand and discover who they are and what direction they want to move in. You know, what makes them happy, what are they grateful for, what is, you know, we emphasize and talk about things like the growth mindset. Yeah, and helping them just have like mindfulness and how to be centered and how to manage stress, for example, how to manage anxiety. A lot of these things that, you know, I think everybody's very aware that young people can go through. I mean, it's a time of immense change and a lot of pressure and decisions that they need to make, and a lot of reasons for them to feel a lot of anxiety. And that is something that I think is going up, isn't it? It's something that we read about a lot, is the levels of anxiety and problems and kind of psychological problems that young people can go through. And so the Human Flourishing is really to help our learners just kind of cope with those changes and help to make well-judged decisions and, you know, how to have difficult conversations with people and things like that. So it's really the idea of the flourishing curriculum is to help them have like a toolkit of things that they can turn to help them in times of difficulty or in times of stress, or just generally to avoid getting into those times of difficulty and stress. And, you know, very much forward thinking, but also appreciating the moment as well. And so we have a head of flourishing and inclusion, and she's also works as the learning designer for the flourishing curriculum, and it's something that we really help. Yeah, I think it just really helps the learners, and it's I think something that's great at School of Humanities is that this is an integral part of the curriculum. So yeah.
Amazing. And that's a curriculum, by the way, that I think will be useful for absolutely everyone. Like, who doesn't need to know how to manage their stress, or to figure out what are the things that make you happy and how to prioritize them? Because when we, like in many studies, when we ask people about what makes you happy, and people put up there like relationships, having time for myself, contemplating, being in nature. But then when you look at how prioritize are those things in your to-do list on a daily basis, they don't add up at the top. And yeah, that leads to lots of different problems, but one of them is that we don't feel fulfilled in our lives if we're not doing things that we consider meaningful and that really add to our happiness.
Yeah, and I think we, as a team at School of Humanities, I think we often think, you know, I wish we'd had that when we were growing up, and it just wasn't. Certainly when I was at high school, this was just not a thing. I mean, it wasn't, you know, nobody even thought that learners had to think about that kind of thing. So, and I think now especially it's really important that, and we are more aware now and know that this sort of thing is something that everybody needs to deal with. And, you know, as a team as well, we have flourishing sessions as well to help the team grow and develop and bond. So it's just, you know, it's important. They're important skills to be able to develop.
Absolutely. Okay, so I would like to wrap up and maybe end up with 2 call to actions for 2 people that are listening, 2 types of people that are listening this and maybe are interested in the School of Humanity. One of them might be families that want their children to join the program, and another one might be schools that are thinking, hey, wouldn't it be amazing to be able to partner to access some of those elements in the curriculum? Maybe let's start with families and learners about when is the next opening.
Yeah. So it's important to note as well that at School of Humanity we kind of accept learners on a rolling basis. So for example, we've got a new learner joining us next week, for example, even though that we're kind of into the term. So it is set up in such a way that, and especially because of the credits, that you accumulate credits as you go. Something that was really important that I hadn't mentioned was that we don't penalize learners for not doing work. So if you do the work, you get the credit. If you don't do the work, you simply don't get the credit. It's not like you have, you know, marks taken off, for example. So it's very much kind of approaching the learner from a place of love and encouragement and helping, supporting them. So from that point of view, we are open to learners and families reaching out at any point, at any time. We do have a website, of course, which is www.sofhumanity.com. So please do have a look at the website. We have application form, which is always open for the high school. So at any point you can apply. We do have a summer school coming up as well. So the summer school is a 5-week program where we have a cohort that is more kind of based on the East Coast time of the US, and then we have a cohort that is GMT +4, so kind of Europe and Middle East. And the summer school is a great way of kind of, well, I mean, it's a great program in itself, but it's also a good way of exploring and kind of thinking about the summer the high school as well, for anybody who's maybe not sure about the methodology, if that's something that would work for their child. So the summer school is a 5-week program. And again, the learners will choose the challenge they want to work on, but it's reduced into that 5 weeks. And within that 5 weeks, they'll also do an internship program, a project. So it's very concentrated, very intense, but very fulfilling program. The applications for that close on the 22nd of May, so that's coming up very, very quickly. So anybody interested in that, please do apply now. And yeah, I mean, anybody can, sorry. I was going to say that just from the point of view of following School of Humanity, there's of course on the Instagram and LinkedIn and places like that, at SOF Humanity.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's great. So that's for families, for learners that want to give it a try this summer. It's a great chance to do so. And now I'm thinking that I've met so many alternative schools, holistic schools, schools that are rethinking the way that they work. And they create a sense of community, and many times they're even created by families. But then when it reaches the point of high school, many people have to go to conventional schools because they haven't found alternatives nearby. So there might be that some of those schools want to partner with the School of Humanity so that their learners can move on there. And there can be also high schools that want to integrate some elements of your curriculum and your research, because there's a lot of, I really believe in the power of sharing the things that we do. And that we don't need to reinvent the wheel every single time. So there's already lots of people doing amazing work. Let's get inspired from it. Let's take and copy and collaborate as much as we can, because I think that's the way humanity have developed pretty much. So how an organization that would like to collaborate with you, what are the paths that are available?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, reaching out to us directly through the social media, through LinkedIn, and just saying how they might be interested in collaborating. We are, of course, open to all sorts of collaborations and exploring many collaborations. In fact, specifically how you talked about maybe middle schools, for example, wanting to find a high school option for that's more in line with what they're doing, or offering after school programs as well. That's something that we have a 6-month after school program that we can run with schools specifically. So I would encourage anybody who is interested to reach out either directly to me or to anybody on the team at School of Humanity. Can reach out. The email is hello@sofhumanity.com, and or via the website. Of course, there's ways to connect to us through the website as well to make inquiries.
Fantastic. I think it's gonna keep on growing. I think these types of, and also because it's global, so I think it brings that element of cultural competence that you can only access when you have a global community of young people collaborating in these big challenges, and this is a reality of today. I mean, I work at the moment with people in India, and I just had a call with someone in Colombia, and we need to be able to collaborate and trust on each other, even though we're not sitting side by side, and that's an important skill to develop, and that the children or youth that are joining School of Humanity definitely are having that impactful experience.
Absolutely, I love that. I love it. We have, we have learners in, for example, somebody in Uganda who was having a lot of rain recently, and so she was describing, what it was like, the climate like there with all the rain that they were experiencing at the time, and other learners who have, other things going on locally, and they kind of share that with the team, and it really is very, very enriching. It adds that kind of global richness and diversity, and just makes them very open-minded and able to collaborate with people worldwide.
Fantastic. Awesome. So thank you very much, Claire, for joining us today and sharing about this amazing initiative. Anything that we can do to keep spreading the word about this possibility, being open for people to join and collaborate, we'll be more than happy to do so.
Thanks, David. It's been great. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.